right. I am apparently live. I don't know if we're getting the countdown or not. Let me know, friendly neighborhood Jesus freak, if you're in there. I just don't have a way to test that little 2-minute countdown or whatever it is that happens. Did you see that 2-minute countdown? Be curious if you did. How's it going there, Andy? You caught my text message in there saying, what's up? How are things going? Hope things are going well with y'all. We had a pretty good day today. Been a pretty busy day on the yard, cutting the grass, doing all that kind of stuff in the garden. But you don't really care about that. Otherwise, I'd be a gardening channel. Okay. All right. So it doesn't look like I got the countdown. I'm not sure why, but that's okay. That's okay. We're live, and I guess that's all that matters. So today I wanted to talk specifically about the verses which are often cited as not being, as being in the King James Version, but not being in the modern translations. And we know that there's some really popular ones, right? Like Acts 8:37 and 1 John 5:7 and 8. And oftentimes what I'll see, and what kind of spurred this video on is there was a post in a Bible group that I tend to frequent a lot. And the post listed a whole bunch of Bible verses that were, missing in the modern translations that occurred in the King James Version. And the person who posted this, I can't remember who it was, but was clearly trying to make the point that the King James Version didn't necessarily, or the modern versions didn't take them out, but that the King James Version added these. So there was a little bit of ignorance, and I don't mean that. Ignorance is such a funny word. When I was a kid, I always saw like calling someone ignorant as a really bad, nasty thing, and there was so much. Obviously, it's a negative thing. That it was like almost like a cuss word, but it just means you don't know. I didn't know that growing up. My mom would, don't be so ignorant, and I always thought that was like an insult, but it's not an insult. So they were they're generally ignorant of the fact that the Byzantine text contains many of those verses, not all of them, but it contains many of them, and it got me thinking like, how many verses which are in the King James Version that don't appear in the modern text, how many of those actually appear in the Byzantine text? So that's what kind of gave me this idea. And so the other thing that I kind of wanted to combat a little bit, actually, I'm not a fighter. I got my butt kicked in school, but that's okay. Hey, how's it going, James? But I think what happens is sometimes people are so trying to battle the King James Version onlyism mindset that they tend to look at all these verses and think that because the CT doesn't, or the critical text doesn't include them, that they're all a write-off. And so they kind of get lumped together as, well, all these verses, they should be removed and they're not scripture. But I'm here now saying, whoa, hold on a minute. Just hold your horses, okay? Because not all of them should be removed, okay? Not all of them should be removed. And of course, my King James Version friends, they will say, well, none of them should be removed. But anyway, that's beside the point. So what I wanted to do was to take a look at some examples and see how many of them actually are in the Byzantine text. So how close is the TR in the Byzantine text? That's really the question. Now let's take a look at some of the comments. It's pretty busy in here. Jacob Emmanuel, hey, what are y'all doing in here? Well, I'm making a video. I don't know what the rest of you guys are doing in there. I'm just assuming you're watching. RR, I'm glad I'm now able to get in on the chats. I appreciate your deep dives into Bible translation. Thanks, RR. Jacob Emmanuel, you were ignorant about being ignorant. I know, that's so funny. I was. Mr. James Snap, good to see you. I got your stuff in the mail. I'm going to do a video, and I'm going to show off the stuff that you sent me because it's really cool, and I'm really happy about it. Jacob Emmanuel, hey James, the more I know I don't know. Tell me about it. The more that I know, the more I feel unqualified to be talking about it. All right. Andy Nguyen, Tim Nichols, he's really good. I liked him. He actually did a video about this exact topic. Some translation Bibles contain them in the footnotes. Yes, they do. Greetings from Silver Springs. How's it going, Ross? Hope things are going well with you. Thanks for popping by. I'm a KJV loving Pentecostal. Oh, another Pentecostal. Praise the Lord, brother. Neither is popular. Well, it's true. Actually, it depends where you are. I used to work at an insurance company as a software developer, and we had a lot of people on our team who were from India. And it's crazy because when I told them that I was a Pentecostal, they were like, what? You like, I thought they were only in India. So apparently Pentecostalism is really popular in India. I didn't know that, but apparently that's the case. I mainly use the KJV, but I'm not averse to using other translations. You know what? It's kind of the same thing with me. I use the New King James Version a lot. I use the New King James Version a lot, and the King James. It's on my nightstand right now, and I'm reading through the King James Version as we speak. Well, not as we speak, but you know what I'm talking about. Oh, James, you're leaving so early. Buy his books. And Jacob, Ross, nice brother. I'm from Charlottesville. There we go. All right. Okay, so that's that. So what I did is I took a look at these verses. I collected about 15 of them. Actually, I collected 16. Amen, feeling more ignorant daily. Yeah. I collected 16, but the 15th one, I couldn't see what the difference was in it, so I just left it out. But you can see my handy-dandy spreadsheet here. I could probably even make that a little bigger so we can really see it and appreciate all the references. So I have the biblical passage here. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on Matthew 17:21 once we're done going through this, because this one is actually more important than I had initially realized. So Matthew 17:21, and then I have where it is in the critical text, and then I have where it is in the Byzantine text. But I hit that column because I don't want to reveal it all right away. So Matthew 17:20, I'm probably going to end up revealing it all because I can't unhide specific cells. It's okay. So Matthew 18-11, Matthew 23-14, 7-16, 9:44-46, 11-26 in Mark, and 15:28. I didn't put Mark 16:9-20 in here, and I didn't put in the story of the woman caught in adultery, just because those are really big and really popular, and those kind of get separate treatment. John 5:3-4, Acts, a couple in Acts, one in Romans, excuse me, and then of course 1 John 5:7-8. That deserves a whole discussion all its own. So we came down here, so that's 15. Okay, minus 1 because of the header. Okay, I've got headers. Don't do the -1 error. That can get you into trouble. I learned that the hard way. And then these ones here that are separated from the main bunch, from the main 15. The main 15 are entire verses. But then these ones here are just clauses within a verse. Now, I mean, there's probably more than that, but I just put these in because they were interesting, and I think these were on Nick Sayer's website, that Textus Receptus, the Textus Receptus Wiki. So those are all the verses which have King James Version support and then are not in the critical text. So basically any new Bible translation, New American Standard, ESV. The NIV is a very weird one, and we can talk a little bit about that. And I'm not talking about the new NIV, but like is it the 1985 one? That's weird. Luke 17:36 even has a textual note in the King James. I'm sure it does. I didn't look at textual notes in the KJV, but I did compare a bunch of other things. Anyway, so these are the verses in question. These are going to be your biggest textual variants here amongst between the critical text and the Textus Receptus. But of course, we're not really too concerned about the comparison between the critical text and the Textus Receptus. Maybe another video, but this one, I want to see what the numbers add up to for our Byzantine text. So if I unhide these, go boop. Here it is, right where you can see the whole thing. Let me just slide this over so you guys can't see that. There we go. Too far. Too far. Here we go. There we go. All right, we'll take a look at those in a second. So, all right. So here's how the list goes. So we got Matthew 17:21. This is, but these kind don't come out. However, these kind don't come out by prayer and fasting. Now, there's another one in Mark 9, which it says these kind don't come out except through prayer. But then the variant in Mark 9 is prayer and fasting. And this one, it's interesting. So we'll talk about that one afterwards. But it's in the Byzantine text along with the TR. It's omitted from the critical text. Matthew 18:11. I should have just put the verses here and then we wouldn't have to look at them. I go here. 18:11. For the Son of Man is come to save that which is lost, is not in the critical text, but it's in the Byzantine text. Matthew 23:14. Which one is that? Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Again, that's in the Byzantine text, not in the critical text. So it matches with the TR. So anyway, we could go through each one of these individually, but I don't think we need to entirely do that. Although maybe next time if I do something like this, I'll include the verses. But where it gets really interesting is here, where the Byzantine text omits the passage along with the critical text. So what that means, generally speaking, is that where this occurs, where the critical text and the Byzantine text omit a passage, the Textus Receptus has a minority reading there. So which one is this? So Luke, whoop, there we go. We'll go to Luke here. 2 men shall be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. And then the next passage, I think, is like 2 women will be grinding at them. This is, Jesus' Olivet Discourse. So this passage here is apparently not in the Byzantine text, and it is not in the critical text. Now, when I say not in the Byzantine text, I mean it's not entirely supported in the Byzantine text. We'll take a look at some of the numbers a little bit later here, but there is still some Byzantine manuscripts and Byzantine families which would support these omitted verses. But I think if we look at the numbers, I think the majority is not just a simple majority, but a great majority. We'll take a look at that again in a moment. This one here, so Acts 8:37, I think everybody knows this one. This is that conversation with Philip. And just to refresh everybody's memory, and Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. This is Philip asking if he should get baptized. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So this is the confession of Philip the eunuch. So this is not a Byzantine reading, and it's not a critical text reading, but it's a Textus Receptus reading. I even think it might even be in the Antoniades text. Yeah, I've got concerns with losing Acts 8:37. Yeah. So that's an important one, I think. Acts 15:34. And we'll just take another quick look here. Notwithstanding, it pleased Silas to abide there still. That was one, and then Acts. Now, I think it was just, this is like 2 verses long. And you're probably noticing a pattern as we're kind of going through these. Who also hath gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law. But the chief captain Lysias came upon us, and with great violence took him away from our hands, commanding his accusers to come unto thee by examining, of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all these things. So again, this is not in the Byzantine or the critical text. As a TR minority reading. And then I think there was one more here. Now, the yellow one is interesting. We'll take a look at that in a moment here, but we know 1 John 5:7-8. Man, if you're watching this channel and you don't know what the variant is on 1 John 5:7-8, you'll just have to go look it up. I don't feel the need to have to. We know that one, the 3 heavenly witnesses. Now, where it gets interesting is here. So Luke 9:55-56, I have that as a yes and a no. A yes and a no. And the reason why is because it is in the Byzantine text, but it's listed, the no reading, the omission is listed in the margin of the Byzantine text. So Maurice Robinson, in his 2005 edition, put actual Byzantine marginal readings in the side margins instead of like on the bottom. So in Luke 9:55-56, let's pull it up just to remember what it is. We have it in the Byzantine text listed there. But then we have it in the margin as not being part of the passage. So it says, but he turned and rebuked them and said, ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of, for the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. And then lastly here, Acts 9:5-6. Again, this isn't the whole verse. This is just a portion of the verse. I'd probably have to look at the little notes here to remember which portion it is. It is hard for ye to kick against. No, there it is. It's verse 6. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said to him, arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. So those are all the verses which which are questioned in the Byzantine tradition. So it's interesting when you compare those who take the King James Version and then say, well, the King James Version is adding all of these passages, and then it kind of gets written off. And again, it comes down, I think, to just a significant bit of it. It comes down to a bit of ignorance in the matter. And I think what happens is people see King James Version only, and then the immediate retort is not really to consider what they're saying, but just to lump everything together, when you can't necessarily lump these together, because many of these have so much more support in the manuscript tradition than is often led to believe. Like there's some, which is like 99.7% of manuscripts support the reading, and then of the 0.2, yes, I know they don't add it to 100%, but the 0.2, and then the ECM and the critical text goes with the 0.2. Likely because of Aleph and B. That would be my guess. If you look at it even closer, that's probably going to be the case. Now, I do plan, I think what might be interesting would be to do a playlist and just deep dive into each one of these individually and see what manuscripts and what commentaries and what other things are saying about these specifically. And I think that'd be kind of cool to have that in like a searchable database, so that if you come across these passages, you can search it and find some of the teaching on that. I think that would be really cool. Yeah, so there are, out of the 15 full verses, I know there's 16. I can't remember what happened with the 15 one, but out of the 15, we have 5 verses that are omitted in the Byzantine text, which means that the other 10 are matching with the King James Version. Now, some of them have textual variants within that verse, but not there aren't like loads and loads. It's usually like one other variant. So that's good. Now, if you'll notice here, this is what's really cool. Aside from 1 John 5, 7, and 8, look at this. All of the omissions occur in the book of Acts. And then you have Luke. And as you know, Luke and Acts are written by the same person. So I don't know what to make of that. But all the differences between the Byzantine text and the Textus Receptus are all in Acts, are all in Luke and Acts. You come down here, we have, again, Luke, which is, has it in the margin. So, and Acts. So everywhere else it's good. So I really don't know what to make of that. My understanding is that the book of Acts was written in Rome. So does that mean that we should take some of the Latin readings for that? I don't know. I suppose that if you were to trace this down into the Vulgate, you'll likely find that these passages that are omitted, I'm almost willing to bet that each one of those, all of them, are probably in the Vulgate. That would be my guess. There's probably Latin support for them. And then even here, you're probably going to find Latin support for Luke 9:55, verse 56. So yeah, again, I don't entirely know what to make of that. I'd be curious to see if anyone here has any theories on why specifically the TR and the Byzantine text seem to have issues in Luke and Acts. Maybe it's his complicated Greek, right? Because in the book of Acts and the book of Luke, if you go to read these books in Greek, it's very hard. It's a slog, right? Anybody who's done Greek, if you're reading Acts and Luke, it's just very difficult. It's not easy. You go to 1 John or the Gospel of John or Revelation or Galatians or Mark, right? Those are much easier to read in Koine than Luke and Acts. They're probably the hardest books in all of the New Testament. So I wonder if that has maybe something to do with it. Again, I don't know. I just think it's a really interesting pattern or a really interesting thing that's happening between the TR and the Byzantine. So Luke and Acts. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. I think that might be worth... that's some notes there. Yeah, I think that might be worth digging into a little bit. Let's pop over into the comments and see what y'all are saying. Hey, y'all. I'm a Canadian. I just said y'all. All right. 2 in the field, 1 taken, 1 left. Hi, Dwayne from Illinois. How's it going, Wesley? Mr. Grau? The KJV has a textual footnote on that verse. Yeah, you know what? Why don't you go ahead, friendly neighborhood Jesus freak? If you know what that textual note says, why don't you pop it up? I'd be interested to see that. Um, friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. That's the one verse where I have my suspicions. Okay, that's Acts 8:37. Oh, come on, man. That's one of our favorite texts for believers' baptism. Yeah. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. That. When I was a toddler, I was outside with my mom, and she was pruning plants. She told me that I picked up a live branch and a dead one, and said, one will be taken and the other left. Yeah, that's a very interesting, what do you call it? Illustration. I like that. Which one's going to be taken? Which one's going to be left? That is really the crux of the conversation, depending on who you ask. If you're, if we're going to premillennial, pre-wrath or pre-trib or whatever, right? The question is who's taken and who's left? Are those being judged left on the earth? And are those, the dead branches, are they the ones being left? And are the live branches being taken? Or are the live branches being left and the dead branches being taken? Just to use your illustration, right? Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, the other left. Who's taken? And what are they talking about? Taken to what? Are they taken to judgment? Or are they taken in the rapture, right? To heaven, to meet the Lord in the air. Maybe not to heaven, but to meet the Lord in the air. So, yeah, there's some questions there. Maybe something I'll tackle one of these days. Not on this channel. Maybe on the church channel. We'll see. All right. Where are we here? My translation of the Kama Yawanam: in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit, and they are one, and they are three who bear witness on the earth. Sure. Where are we here? Oh, there's a lot of comments. You guys are busy in there. That's good. All right. There's something I call the internal checksum. Most stuff missing in the CT are actually missing. They're missing in one place. In some cases, the answer is they were pulled in from the Vulgate. It could very well be. That's why I think that if you look at all of these omitted passages with the CT, you're probably going to find support in the Vulgate. I just ran into John 5 passage today in my daily reading and went on a rabbit trail. Oh, good. Is that the angel troubling the water? I can't remember. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak uninteresting. I do have a Dewey Rames, but I haven't read it much. Yeah, that is. I do have it. Look at that. We can take a look at that here. John 5. I believe that's the angel troubling the water. But yeah, for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatever disease he had. Okay, we call it the angel jacuzzi. He's mixing up the water, it's all good. All right. Easiest way to tell is Isaiah 5:1b. The actual Dewey Reams reads, "A vineyard was made to my beloved, and horns of oil." And the Challoner reading actually makes sense. Okay. Jacob. Okay, that's just some conversation here. Ross, your charts make for great screenshots for a later study. I'm glad. What I want to do with these charts and these spreadsheets, I'm a spreadsheet nerd. I can do so much good stuff with a spreadsheet. But I'd like to find a way to put the file somewhere to let people download them. So if anyone has an idea of what I could do, I think you could link it to Dropbox or OneDrive or something like that. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best way to do it. I'm sure there's got to be a place somewhere where these files can be uploaded, because I know some people will find them interesting. Yeah, the Vulgate says she shall crush him. Okay, that's more conversation about Isaiah there. The Luke 17:36 one. This 36th verse is wanting in most of the Greek copies. Let's pull that up, because I actually have a few more details here. I'll pull the deets up. Now, let me see if I can... where is it? It's been a while since I had to do this. We can freeze the left column. I can't remember how to do it. Here, let me just try this. Page layout. Oh, it's been so long. There it is. Freeze panes. There we go. There we go. Now, if I bring this back. And there we go. There, I can freeze the paint. There we go. So we got our verses here. Now, I have made a note on some of these, so we can see the red. That's great. We'll take a look at that one after. Yeah, so Mark 15:28, what is that? The Antoniades text uses square brackets there. So again, to say the Antoniades text doesn't think Mark 15:28. But Luke 17:36, I didn't get the percentages there. And you know why? Is because the percentages, which you're going to see here, they actually come from a full collation done by the ECM. So for Acts, we have it. For Mark, we have it. For Luke, we don't have it. And that's because Luke hasn't been done yet. So for reference, where I'm getting the percentages from, this is Adam Boyd's work. You can't see that, but this is the Text Critical English New Testament put together by Adam Boyd, and he has in here, this one's in English. He's got a Greek one as well. I think I have an electronic copy of it somewhere. But he's got percentages in the bottom apparatus. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. But in the bottom apparatus, he's got the percentages of how many manuscripts go for which specific reading, because there's a number of places now with the ECM being done where full collations have been done of every manuscript with certain passages. And so with some of these, we have those. With Luke 17:36, I'm sorry, friendly neighborhood Jesus freak, we do not have, or I don't have easy access to those details, and I just don't have the time to run through and calculate those. It's a tremendous amount of work to get those percentages. But Acts 8:37 is interesting because if you look here, 86% of manuscripts omit it, and 0.2 manuscripts contain it. Right, and that's Philip, believer's baptism, right? So what? Now I know that these don't add up to 100%. I understand that, and I think the reason for that is some manuscripts you either can't determine the reading at all, or the manuscript of Acts doesn't contain it. It's damaged there, or maybe it stops at Acts 7 or whatever it is. So yeah, they're not going to add up to 100%. And there were some cases where there were a number of other variants which don't really matter so much for this conversation, which weren't included. That's not the case here. These are just the ones that contain it, the ones that omit it, and then the ones that it just you can't tell either way. So Acts 15:34. This is interesting, and this is why it's not in the Byzantine text, is because almost 70% of the manuscripts, most of those are going to be Byzantine, don't contain Acts 15:34. So based on the percentages, again, I'd like to do a deeper dive into this, and that's kind of why I want to go in and do a video on each variant here, because there's probably more to the story than just a simple percent. In fact, there's always more to the story than a simple percentage, but at a quick glance, it kind of gives us an idea of why things went the direction it went. Again, Acts 24, 6-8. So it's contained in the marginal note. 55.3% of manuscripts omit it, and this is why we don't particularly call Byzantine priority majority text position, because in this case, you would look at 55.3% and be like, yeah, we need to look at that. Right? Because I don't know, I don't think you could say that gives us enough detail, right? Because it's so close, right? Because it's so close, you wouldn't just count noses and be like, okay, 55.3% over the threshold, so we put it in. This would have to be, validated, looked at, weighed, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it would be interesting to do a deep dive into there. But it's close. It's close. And it's so close that it's contained a marginal reading, which means that its inclusion or its exclusion could potentially be a Byzantine reading. Now, the fact that the excluded variant is put into the Byzantine means that Dr. Robinson, when he put his text together, he thinks that one has more weight to it. So the exclusion has more weight than the exclusion, or than the inclusion. So that's the way it went. And then, of course, we got 1 John 5, 7, and 8. 0.6% of Greek manuscripts contain it. Greek manuscripts of 1 John. So I think that works out to like 4 or 5 or something like that. So it's not very many. That might even be a lot. So that's some of the details there. Again, we run into another situation here. I don't have the percentages because, we don't have the details for Luke. But again, Luke 9, 55 to 56. Let me pull it up. I need to remember what that was. But he turned and rebuked them, saying, "You know not what manner of spirit you are of, for the Son of Man has not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them." And they went to another village. All right. So this is either in there. I think it's just a part of that. And then there is an omission in the marginal notes. So the marginal notes say that this isn't in there. So the weight of evidence, according to Dr. Robinson, appears to be that this passage is genuine and should be in the body of the text. But because it's going to be close in the Byzantine tradition, he's got the omission noted in the margin. So again, little level of uncertainty there surrounding this passage in Luke 9. And then Acts 9, 5 to 6. Did I not put that in there? Let me take a look. We can take a look right now because I got the books right beside me. So Acts 9. Acts 9. Verse 5 to 6. That's why I don't have it. He doesn't have the percentages listed, so it's possible that we don't have all the details for that one. Okay, we'll just leave it there for now. And then yeah, so that's it generally for the verses which are omitted. Which are omitted from the critical text, are found in the Textus Receptus, and then compared with the Byzantine. So again, just to kind of summarize this, right, of the 15 that I have listed here, 5 of them are not included in the Byzantine text, and a couple of them are close. Right, there's marginal reading for 2 of them, and then we have one here, partial verse omitted, and then this one here, which is included but has a note showing its omission in the marginal text. So that is really interesting. Like I said, I do want to take a look at these individually, and so I'll probably do a separate video for each one of these individually as we go through. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the comments here. What is going on? You guys are having a good chat in there. All right, Angel Jacuzzi, yeah. I had a pastor. We used to live in London, Ontario. We had a pastor there, Pastor Mark, and he would always say the Angel Jacuzzi, and it stuck. The pool of Bethesda was where they bathed the sacrificial lambs. I'm not sure about that. I would have to look at that. Sounds interesting if that's the case. Have y'all heard about the thing with the lion and the lamb? What thing is that? Are you talking about the Mandela effect? If you're referring to the so-called Mandela effect, I think a lot of that is just the human memory is a funny thing and doesn't work as well as we'd think. That's funny. I'm probably right. Yeah, I was just quoting the KJV footnote. Oh, where did you quote the KJV footnote? Oh, there it is. This 36th verse is wanting. Oh, okay. Interesting. So that's in the KJV. Is that like on the actual 1611 edition, or is that like one of the later paragraph editions? Let's keep going here. It would be nice to be able to download the charts and stuff. Yes, you know what? Maybe in the next video, I will figure out where I can put them to make them available. Right now, if you're going to get them, you're just going to get them as is. I haven't necessarily went through and checked them out to check spelling errors and stuff like that. These are just generally put together for my own thinking and my own thought. So if you can benefit from them, which I think you could, just know that you're probably going to find some, minor errors and stuff like that in there. A lot of people's faulty memory about the KJV, for example, is because they're remembering isn't actually the KJV. It's probably the NIV. It could be. The TR was actually missing part of a verse in IIRC 1 John 2 that the KJV brought in from the Vulgate and italicized. I know there's one in 1 John 3, 1 John 3:16. This hereby is the love of God. The of God is, I think it's either italicized in one edition, but not in the others, but perhaps it was supposed to be italicized. I can't really remember entirely, but I know there's some discussion surrounding 1 John 3:16. All right. The angel Uriel. I'm not sure about that one. So Luke 11:2-4 came up one day in the readings, and the pastor was reading from the RSV, and we had the KJV. My grandmother raised Cain after we left. I don't know what you mean by raised Cain. All right. I'm sure you'll fix that in the comments there, or let me know what you mean by that. So RR, Jesus freak, my parents were both Sunday school teachers. My father had a Bible with 4 translations in it, but as a family, we studied from the KJV. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you'll see it on the 16. Okay, so it's on the 1611. Okay, I wasn't aware of that one. Want of Greek manuscripts. Interesting. So, yeah, that's actually a question. I bet you Nick Sayre's site probably has something on that. Maybe it'd be worth taking a look at that at some point. I read the canons of lower textual criticism and find the arguments very arbitrary and lacking common sense. Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting question about arbitrariness and lacking common sense, because I came to another post in one of the Facebook groups, and it said something along the lines of somebody who's pursuing a Byzantine type of a text and is starting to get swayed by the position, which is awesome. Come join us. There's so much good stuff on the Byzantine text side. But he was struggling with the fact of, I didn't get a chance to post a response, at least I don't think I did. He was struggling with the fact that some of the variants, just common sense seems to lead that they would not be the Byzantine reading for whatever reason. But the question is what do you mean by common sense? Because what common sense is to one person in the field of textual criticism isn't necessarily common sense to another. That common sense is probably going to be undergirded by something. And so if you take the principles of modern textual criticism and you know them off by heart and you're very well aware of them, then to you, common sense is going to run through those principles and come out with a specific reading. So common sense in that sense isn't really common. It's specialized sense. And we don't really, it comes down to the whole discussion about presuppositions again. Like, how do you think God preserved the text? Did he do so through a textual family like the Byzantine text, or did he do so through a printed edition during the Reformation like the TR, or did he do so through reason and thinking your way through how these, like, there's a presupposition undergirding what you call common sense. So that's an important thing to really realize. And once you understand that there's presupposition undergirding these common sense questions, then all the textual positions begin to make sense. Because, if you're just looking at the evidence and you're interpreting it, that's great. But the root of the issue is, how to interpret that. And how you interpret that is going to be based on your view of preservation and how God did it. So yeah, typically we work from our presuppositions and then use those to come to some conclusions. Now, I know that may seem circular, and perhaps it is, but that's really the truth of the matter. A King James Version onlyist, for example, he doesn't go into the text and say, okay, what do I have here that shows me what's going to happen? Well, he doesn't. He comes with this preconceived idea that God preserved his word through the King James Version, and maybe they get that through some other means. But then they'll interpret the evidence in light of that, as opposed to the evidence. Yeah. And I think the reason why, and this is the important bit, the reason why we come to the table with our presuppositions is because we really do not have enough data to determine which one of those things go, right? We just don't have enough. I mean, we have, I don't doubt that we have all the readings, it's always been said above and below the line. Yeah, that's fine. I get that. It works above and below the line. We have the text of scripture, right? In the manuscript tradition, and we're trying to puzzle that together. I understand that. But there's not, if we found a cache of manuscripts from the 2nd century in the Byzantine Empire, that would change everything, but we don't have that. All we have are a few Egyptian manuscripts that are early, and that's it, a very tiny region. So any widespread geographical stuff in the 2nd century, you're going to have to look to the early church fathers to see some of that. You're going to have to take a sampling of every geographical location that's around you. But we don't have as many manuscripts going back to the 2nd century. Like, we just don't. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have enough to piece together what the New Testament is. Of course we do. We have the TR, we have the Byzantine text, we have the modern critical text. That's great. But that kind of leads to this next point where you have to come up with a presupposition somewhere in order to make sense of the data that we do have. So anyway, that's part of why I think people tend to begin with their presuppositions. Should you begin with the presupposition? I don't want to say, I wouldn't necessarily say you shouldn't, but if something comes and challenges that presupposition, well, then you're going to have to think through it, right? All right. So Bruce Dickinson, I am aware. Oh, hold on. Common cents are 1/100th of a euro. All right. Nice. Or 1/100th of a Canadian dollar. 1/100th of a loonie, right? Okay. We got a lot of comments. You guys are commenting up a storm. That's great. Jesus Freak, my parents were both Sunday. Okay, where we are. I read the canons of lower textual criticism, find the arguments very arbitrary and lacking yes. There's one with, I think, Tyndale, Coverdale, Geneva. She got really mad. Oh, okay, gotcha. That was Raising Cain. Gotcha. She got really mad. Okay. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that before. That's a colloquialism I've never heard. Maybe it's because we're too far north. We don't see the real world. No. Are they nice? They made an edition of the ESV that kind of follows. Yeah. So the Gideons, they made an edition of the ESV that has many of these TR variants in there. So they put those in. I feel that a lot of textual criticism has historically been done by Catholics and skeptics, atheists, which is why the critical text is so apparently iconoclastic. Yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't know if I have enough knowledge to suggest that all the historical guys were Catholic. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I could say that. As far as I understand, I think Westcott and Hoare, they were Anglicans or something like that. I don't know if Tischendorf or von Soden, I don't know what their affiliation was. I know there's a lot of textual critics today who would be considered Protestant, like Peter Gurry, Elijah Hickson, Maurice Robinson, David Allen Black, who I just interviewed. Check that out if you haven't seen it. So there seems to be a lot more Protestant ones today. Then you've got the outlier, right? Bart Ehrman, who is not a Christian at all, which is an interesting thing. Either way. All right, James Sheffield, Irenaeus in the 3rd book Against Heresies, Acts 12:8, distinctively quotes a portion of this verse, Bing search. Okay, yeah. That I'm sure I'll come across that one when I deep dive into these. So Woo Bryant, how's it going? Since there are multiple versions of the TR, shouldn't it be called the Textus Recepti? After all, if the plural of alumnus is alumni, shouldn't the plural of receptus be recepti? Yeah, I don't know. I would typically refer to the text, the received text, as more of a tradition than an individual. And to be honest, I think our confessional bibliology friends do, and a number of our King James Version only brothers, they would consider the TR a family of manuscripts. So I don't see that as necessarily the problem that I saw as it was before. So again, I'm not a TR guy. I'm not a Byzantine or TR guy or a King James guy, but yeah, there's a little bit more to that discussion than is initially thought. So anyway, that's my presupposition. Very good. Man, there's so much here. Let me see. Oh, sweet. You can literally walk to Canada. You should just walk on over and say hi. It might get a little wet though. I'm Southern, so raised Cain is like saying that she threw a hissy fit. Nice. Mr. Moreno, how's it going? The 19th century textual critics were almost all Protestants. The Catholics didn't catch up for a few decades. That could be the case. Yeah, I see the TR as a text type rather than a single text. Yeah. The TR is basically a Byzantine text with some Latin intrusions. And I think if we're looking at this, today, I think this really shows that the TR is probably more like the Byzantine text, especially when you consider like how close they are in the marginal readings. So, I mean, it's not the TR, but it's close. It's much closer to the TR than the critical text. So Jesus Freak, when I translated the New Testament, I used 2 editions of Erasmus along with the Vulgate because Erasmus had a Latin translation. Nice. And then the NKJV is an excellent translation. I don't know why TR guys don't like or use it. Yeah, I don't know either. Well, I shouldn't say I don't entirely know, but they take some issues with some of the translations. 1 Corinthians 1:18 being one of them, which I discussed actually with Mark Ward a little while ago, and that's the whole to those who are saved versus to those who are being saved. So those who are being saved is in the New King James in 1 Corinthians 1:18, and those who are saved is in the King James Version. And so some would suggest that there's a big doctrinal difference surrounding soteriology there. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. But nonetheless, we shall move on. Wow, it's 9:30 already. Who are becoming saved? Nice. Pastor in Arizona is a TR guy, and he uses the NKJV. Ditto for me for that matter. Yeah, interesting. Is that like Joel or Will Bryant? Joel Ellis is in Arizona using the TR. Is he like a Calvary Chapel pastor? Because I think I heard somewhere that Calvary Chapel tends to see the Textus Receptus in a better light than the critical text. I would be curious if that's the case. I would keep my eye on the comments there and see if you respond to that. Truly curious. All right. Okay, so I want to take a look at Matthew 17:21 because this is an interesting variant. And as I began looking at it, it actually became a more important variant than I had initially thought. And so this is Jesus, Orthodox present. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I initially saw this, and as I was studying, it became apparent that this is actually more important. This is a more important variant than we initially thought. And there's a little more riding on it. Normally we would say something like, there's no textual variants that affect doctrine and stuff, but I think this one kind of does. And it has to be teamed up with another passage for you to see what it does. But yeah, so when it comes to demonology and casting out demons and that kind of stuff, that this is clearly an important verse, right? So in Jesus' teaching, the disciples come to him and they're like, we're so excited. And no, that wasn't it. I'm getting it wrong. I'm getting my story mixed up. Why don't we come to the context and I'll read it and then I won't get mixed up. And Jesus rebuked the devil and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. So Jesus just performed an exorcism essentially. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence yonder place, and it shall be removed, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Howbeit, this kind goeth not out by prayer and fasting. So he's talking about this specific kind of devil. There's something unique to this devil, which requires both prayer and fasting to cast it out. Now, let's just talk a little bit about casting out devils. Now, I'm a Pentecostal pastor. I believe that people can be demon possessed today. I think that can happen. We see that in the scriptures. We see Jesus, like examples here where Jesus is casting out a demon. The one example with the pigs, the demon goes out into the pigs, the unclean spirit, and all the pigs go flying off the edge of the cliff, and everybody's in fear. And of course, the guys, understandably, they just saw their entire herd of pigs go over the ledge, and they, kind of go from here. But anyway, interesting conversations too between the demons and Jesus. Have you come here to torment us before our time? They're talking back to him, and they recognize his authority, and they go when they tell him, right? When Jesus tells them, they go. Now, can that still happen today? I see no reason at all in the scripture. There's no reason at all to suggest that demons were eradicated between the time of the New Testament and today. Nothing. There's just nothing. There's nothing in the scriptures that say that. So we have this whole thing about demons and people being demon possessed. And I'm sure if you look out into the world today, you could probably think of someone who's probably demon possessed just by the way they act or their interest or whatever it is. So the question becomes, how do you get them out? Right now, I think, you see all these guys online and you see a whole bunch of theatrics surrounding casting out demons, and, people turning their heads every which way and people yelling and screaming, and you get frauds like Catherine Crick who go out there and hire actors to do all these things. Okay. I think we as a church, not we as a church, but I think it's been kind of propped up a little bit and exaggerated and made greater than it is. Most times, casting out demons is really no more than just telling it to leave in the name of Jesus. Just praying and asking God to take care of it, and it goes, right. And that's kind of the authority that's given to us by Jesus. So the authority in His name to cast out demons. Sure, okay, it's all good. Now, could somebody get all crazy and do crazy things? It happened in the scriptures. So if it happened in the scripture and there's no reason to suggest that it stopped from the New Testament to today, then it probably could happen today. I've heard some interesting stories. It doesn't happen like that most of the time. But anyway, yeah. So with that being said, I don't want to concentrate so much on casting out spirits. That's like another channel kind of thing. But it comes down to this question here of this verse in Matthew 17, verse 21. Let me make this bigger here. Yeah, here we go. There we go. So in Matthew 17:21, howbeit this kind goeth not out by prayer and fasting. So this verse, again, is not in the critical text. Now, is it a big deal that it's not in the critical text? Initially I thought, well, probably not, because if you go to Mark, I got it here, Mark 9:29. So if you go to Mark 9:29, you see a very similar event, or it probably is the same event. And he says in Mark 9:29, and he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. Okay, good. King James Version. So why is this interesting? Okay, so initially my thinking was, well, in Matthew 17, it's not a big deal because we have it written in Mark 9, and so it's still in there, but by prayer and fasting, and it's all good, and we know that fasting is required to cast out demons. Now, you can make the case that fasting is good to do anyway, but in the King James Version, in the Byzantine text, we're making an explicit case that there are some devils that require not just prayer, but fasting. So if you go and take a look at this verse in a modern translation, let's do NASB Mark 9. What was that again? 29. So if you look at a modern translation, watch this. And he said to them, this kind cannot come out by anything except prayer. Oh, where's the fasting bit? It doesn't say fasting there. So if you go in the same in the same Bible translation, the New American Standard Bible. Now, I just happened to pick this one. It's going to be the same in the ESV and all these things. But if you go back to our passage in Matthew 17, okay, this is the passage, Matthew 17:21, I believe it was. Did I get that wrong? Matthew 17. No, I don't know why that didn't come. Yeah, so if you come back to Matthew 17:21, that's why it didn't show up. It didn't show up because 21 doesn't exist here, right? Verse 21 doesn't exist in the NASB. So any passage that we would have that would encourage us to fast when casting out a demon, like Jesus told the disciples, they do not exist at all. This would be a Christian doctrine that is affected, I would think, in the critical text, right? Because the New American Standard, the two variant readings from Matthew and Mark in fasting and prayer they both leave out fasting. So now there's no verse in the scriptures that tell us to fast or encourage us to fast when casting out demons. So this is important. This is an important one. Now, it's interesting because when I was talking with Dr. Black, when I was talking with Dr. Black, there was a textual variant in there. I forget which one it was, but it was referencing the omniscience of Jesus, who is in heaven. That's what I can't remember where it was. You have to go back and view it. But again, this is another doctrine that doesn't hang on very many scriptures. And so when you take out who is in heaven, you end up removing half of the passages, because there's only one other, that refers to the omniscience of Jesus. The other one being in Mark 16. Lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. So you take those two passages out, and then you don't have much on the omniscience of Jesus. These are interesting. Now, is it going to like destroy the faith and destroy, doctrine? No, but these doctrines are important, and I want them all intact, right? I didn't catch this with prayer and fasting until I looked at them both, because the critical text removes fasting from both of them, from both Matthew 17 and Mark 9. Anyway, if I pulled up this article here from Got Questions. I like Got Questions. It's very skewed to a modern text critical view. They kind of take the popular view on this. But the question is, why did Jesus say that demons could only come out by prayer and fasting? So Mark 9 records a remarkable episode of Jesus casting out an evil spirit. I think we talked all about that. We don't need to recap the story. If Jesus can do anything, take pity, help us. Jesus turned, where is it here? Later the disciples, so this has Got Questions. Later the disciples privately asked Jesus why they could not cast out the unclean spirit. And Jesus replied that the particular kind could only come out by prayer and fasting, while the King James Version records Jesus as saying that the demons in Mark 9 could only come out by prayer and fasting. Other translations, and basically all the modern translations minus MEV and NKJV, leave out and fasting and only mention prayer. The difference is due to some translations' use of older and less numerous copies of manuscripts. Now, this is interesting. The use of older and less numerous copies of manuscripts. And that's true. So if we come back to my notes here, this is how it stacks up. Let me make that nice and big so you can see that really well. But this is how it stacks up. 87% of all manuscripts include the Matthew 17:21 prayer and fasting verse. Okay, it includes it. It's for its inclusion. And only 0.6 are for its exclusion. Now, if you go and take a look at Mark, because Mark also has a variant there, which is what we're talking about, 99.7% of the manuscripts have and fasting in there. And fasting. 99.7. That's 0.3. So the ECM actually has a split line there because they're not sure what to do with it, because they seem to think that maybe they just got it from Mark. But then you have the question of, well, then if you don't think Mark is original, then he didn't get it from Mark. And then there's the question of Markan and Matthean priority. Well, what came first, Mark or Matthew? There's some question there, I guess. But it's interesting. So the ECM split lines it, but the Nestle All-in text just doesn't have it. They obviously have it in the apparatus, but the critical text is favoring the idea of leaving that out. But that the point there is, it's not just a majority that has and fasting, or these don't come out by prayer and fasting, or these only come out by prayer and fasting. It's the vast majority. It's not just the majority; it's a vast majority. So that's just to comment on what they're saying here and Got Questions, right? The translation's use of older and less numerous copies of manuscripts, while the King James Version translate from some of the more recent and more numerous. Some. How about almost all of them? That would be more accurate reflection. Anyway, so sometimes the manuscripts will have slight differences, often referred to as textual variants. Mark 6:9-29 is an example of a passage with a variant. Now, I wouldn't call that a slight variant. Like I said, if you take the critical text position, then you do not have any reference as being original, or you don't have any reference to fasting as being original when taking care of demonic oppression. So now, again, you could make the case that it just makes sense, right? And there we go. The common sense thing, right? You just fast forward a little or rewind a little bit, and you can hear my talk about common sense. You could take a common sense approach and say maybe we should just fast when we do. And I mean, as a practice, generally Christians will fast when they have important things that are happening, or important decisions to make, or important things to pray about, or maybe they just want to get closer to God, so you fast. So no issues with that, but it's taking out an explicit reference to fasting. And so how would I say this? It's not connecting fasting to deliverance when I think it should be. While there are many variants in the Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, it is remarkable that none of the variants create any significant doctrinal challenge. But this one kind of does. I mean, depending on what you mean by significant, I mean, it doesn't touch the cardinal rules of the faith, but it does touch on demon possession and deliverance. They are usually minor and don't impact the message of a passage at all. This one does, in my opinion. In Mark 9:29 is one of the more significant variants. Nothing's, they're usually minor, they don't impact, but this one is important. As differing translations make it unclear whether the demon could only come out by prayer and fasting, or whether prayer alone would work. So there's like a recognition here that this is kind of an important variant. It is worth noting that in the New Testament, fasting was simply prayer so focused and intense that a person did not give attention to the things like eating or drinking. Now, it's really interesting that they make that statement, but they don't provide any passages to back that claim up, because we got to be really... Fasting is just one of those things. Now you're going to get a little bit of a rant, right? Fasting is one of those things we're not good at in the West, right? We're not good at it. We just don't fast, right? Because we live in a society that has all this delicious food. It's yummy. It's tasty. Fill my belly. I will be a glutton. Actually, I did a preach on gluttony once. I had to taper down my own gluttony for a while before I could preach that message. But yeah, we don't fast in the West as often because we're just so used to all the food, and we like to eat all the food, and we have all the sugar and all the stuff in the food that tastes really good. So fasting, you cannot separate fasting from not eating. If you are eating, you're not fasting. And so to say that, well, it's just because you're simply prayer is so focused and intense that, you don't give attention to things like eating or drinking. I think fasting is much more than that. I think this is way too simple of a definition for fasting. But again, that's another question for a day. But by taking the definition of fasting and simplifying it in this way tends to make the textual variant less severe, or makes you think the textual variant is less severe than it is. Either way, Jesus is emphasizing that the demon in Mark 9 could only come out by intensive prayer. But you see, he didn't say intensive prayer, right? I think it's James. He talks about the fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, right, in the King James. The fervent prayer of a righteous man. So it didn't say fasting, although fasting could be part of that fervent prayer. But I don't necessarily know if fasting is part of fervent prayer. So again, you have this whole idea here of changing the definition of fasting. Or maybe not changing the definition, but at the very least, it's simplifying fasting. And why are they doing that in this Got Questions article? I think it's because they're trying to make the variant in Mark 9:29 seem like not as big of a deal as it is. Again, I'm not going to put terrible motives on the guys who wrote the articles. I benefited tremendously from Got Questions, right? I use their stuff all the time. They got generally speaking, it's good stuff. But I think they missed it here. All right. Now, as Jesus explains to the crowd, the key was the faith of those involved. Yes, the faith is important. It's in there. So it is evident that prayer rooted in faith in Jesus Christ is effective. See James' assertion that the prayer of a righteous person is effective. Oh, look at that. They touched on that. Jesus was challenging the crowd, the boy's father and the disciples, on the importance of believing in him as the one who could accomplish what would otherwise be impossible. See, again, we read that, and I don't think that he was challenging the crowd necessarily when he was answering the questions of the disciples. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that because I'd have to look at it some more just to be a little more certain on what I'm saying there. But anyway, that's one example, just kind of gone through with a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb. I think this one, Matthew 17:21, Mark 9, it's an important variant because without it, right? Like if you take fasting out, it's out of both in the critical methodology. And if you're in a deliverance ministry or anything like that, you're probably aware of the importance of fasting. And so, yeah. Anyway, so let's pop over and we'll take a look at the comments and see what's going on. I'm seeing them like scroll on by. It's like someone has a wheel and it just kind of makes a spin really fast. All right, here we go. Okay. Where are we here? Oh, there's a lot of comments. All right, let me pop over. There we go. You can see all the comments here. This is good. I think it's possible that when we hear about people taking 4 hours to cast one out, that's a little questionable. Yeah. I don't know, because we really don't rely on our own power, right? It's we ask the Lord. We ask in Jesus' name, right? Yeah, it mentions the demon throwing him into fire and water. Yeah, exactly. So I'll come into the question of demons. Yeah, they do things. They make people do things. That's the way it is. Maybe we don't understand how that happens or the mechanism by which all that happens, but it does happen. That's just the truth of the fact. So does it say fast when casting out demons anywhere else in the Gospels? No, those, as far as I understand it, those are the only 2 places in the New Testament. If I'm wrong, I'll admit that. But those are the only 2 places it talks about. It mentions fasting in the context of casting demons out. Oddly, the MBLA from the same organization does have. That's interesting. Yeah, and actually, you know what? I mentioned it briefly earlier on, so I'll talk about it now, and that's the NIV. And why the NIV is such a strange translation is because it doesn't use the Textus Receptus, right? That's clear. It doesn't use Byzantine text, but it doesn't use the Nestle-Aland text either. So that's why it's strange. So there's some variants. One of these omissions, it's a Westcott and Hort variant, but the rest of the critical editions have it. But the NIV actually produced their own Greek text and then used that Greek text to produce the NIV. So I don't know all the ins and outs of how that worked, but I think they worked from something like the Nestle-Aland text. And then when there were certain variants in there, the scholars on the team made certain decisions based on, I don't know what, but there was a number of places. I want to think it was somewhere around 600 or 700 places where the, again, I could be wrong, so don't quote me, but there was like 600 or 700 places where the base text of the NIV differed from the Nestle-Aland text. So yeah, that's why it's odd and why it's different. So yeah, I mean, maybe the same thing's happening with the Spanish translation. Maybe they're kind of picking other variants and such. Catherine Crick, cringe. Yes. Catherine Crick's given us like continuationists a bad name. I wish she would stop it. Stop it. In Matthew 17:21, it has pero este clase no sale sino. That's me attempting to speak Spanish. I know zero Spanish. But this type does not depart except with prayer and fasting. Yes. But in Mark, it lacks and fasting. Yeah, it's interesting. I have the NBLA because I'm bilingual. Cool. Fasting appears in both verses in the Dewey Reams, hence why only Catholics are equipped to do exorcisms in movies. Yeah, that's right. They fasted it up, right? They fasted it up. No, but that's not surprising, right? Because I think a lot of these things that we're calling additions, we don't know yet if they're additions or whatever. Maybe they're actually a text. A lot of them are supported in the Latin text. In fact, maybe I'll do this for the next live stream. Is I'll just go through and take a look at these and see if they're supported. Where's the? Yeah, I'll see if these are supported by the Vulgate. I would almost put money on it that these probably have Latin support. Let's see here. Fasting appears. Yes. Well, I guess we could try it and find out if it's right or not. Yeah. Experience, sure. Yeah, I'm not Calvinist either, but I listen to the sermons of Charles Spurgeon, read online, and find them very powerful. Yeah. I have been edified and blessed by Arminians and Calvinists alike. So it's too bad there's such a division between the two positions, because I think there's good, solid brothers on both sides of the conversation. But who is fasting? The one casting it out, or the one demon possessed? Or is it both? I would say that it's going to be the one who is casting the demon out, because he's addressing the disciples' questions. Why could we not do this? And he says, well, it only comes out by prayer and fasting. I'm not Calvinist. I listen to Dr. Leighton Flowers' YouTube channel, Soteriology 101. Yes, I pop in there every once in a while. He's Arminian, isn't he? Provisionist. That's what he calls himself. Maybe that's why some exorcists be taking 4 hours to cast out a demon. They're not. That's right. Nice. I agree. Dr. Flowers, provisionist. We'll just move past that here. Yeah, not just a vast majority, almost entirely. And that's the case with most of these. All the ones that have a Y beside them, that are unquestionably Byzantine, they have the max. The max. Like almost all of them, virtually all of them. You're right. You're absolutely right there. You only run into that problem with here, where you don't have vast majority, but still a great majority for most cases. Oh, hey, there's a whole menu there. I didn't see that. Cool. Okay, let's get rid of that menu. I don't know how to get rid of the menu. Oh no, I don't know how to get rid of the menu. Hang on here. How do I get rid of that? Maybe if I click, there we go. Okay. So my understanding of scripture is this: predestination is made according to the foreknowledge of the future. Yeah. And I think there's, the corridors of time, right? that's the typical response for something like that, right? I like his channel because he has led many people away from Calvinism. Sure. Yes. People falsely accuse him of being Pelagian. Jesus freaks, same. Acts 8:37. E or 08, 8th century Latin, Greek. Yes. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. It would be interesting to do like a survey of some of the early church fathers to see what they had written about Acts 8:37 as well. All right. More Calvinist talk, Calvinist Arminian talk. The God I serve doesn't predestinate. Yeah. Without grace, our free will is turned only to evil. Sure. Preventing grace, you mean prevenient grace. All right, some discussion about free will. I have purposely stayed away from that topic because it tends to get really heated. I know textual criticism and King James Version only. I know that stuff gets pretty heated, but I think Calvinism and Arminianism, that it gets heated in a way that I just don't want to deal with. All right. Yeah. Can you explain how the percentages do not add up to 100%? Yeah. So you're want to know about. Yeah. So you're behind a little bit, but I'll explain it anyway in case you make it this far. In fact, I think I did explain it up to that point, but they don't add up to 100% because there may be other variant readings there which are in those other percentages, and there may be other manuscripts which are perhaps damaged in that passage, which you couldn't count either way. And then there are other manuscripts that maybe contain the book, but don't contain the passage, not because the scribe didn't write it there, but for some other reason. Maybe the manuscript was cut off earlier on and the rest of the book doesn't appear, or whatever it is. So that's basically why. The Holy Spirit doesn't cause a person to not be able. Okay, more soteriology discussion. I have to send you all over to the soteriology page. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Oh, gotcha. I was originally raised Nazarene, but our family switched and joined the Assemblies of God when I was 11. Oh, very good. Yeah, we're PAOC. So PAOC is essentially it's the Canadian version of AOG. Let's be real. A little more discussion on the Spanish text. Here we are, guardian robots. Fasting is denying the flesh. Galatians 5:24 and Romans 8:13-14. Jesus also fasted 40 days before resisting the devil in the will. Yes. And more specifically, I would be even more specific with that, guardian. And that would be fasting is denying the flesh by not feeding it food. Okay. I mean, there's certainly an element of, I'm going to fast from social media, or I'm going to fast from video games, or I'm going to fast from, cake. But in the scriptural sense, when it's talking about fasting, it's literally talking about not eating food. So very important that we keep that distinguishment, because what I'm seeing in the church generally is people will say, well, I'm fasting. But fasting by cutting off social media, it's a good thing. Do it. Trust me. I love it. It's great. Okay. But add to that real fasting with food, and then see how your spiritual life changes. Seriously. It's awesome. Okay. Offhand, I know that the Clementine Vulgate has Acts 8:37, 1 John 5:7. Yes. I mean, if it appears in the apparatus in Nestle Holland, it's fair game for a translator. Yeah, kind of, sort of. I think what appears in the body of the text of the Nestle Holland text is generally considered to be what they think is the actual text, or the closest to the actual text. But now my understanding, though, is the Nestle Holland text is typically used for scholarly work in textual criticism. But when you're going to do translation work, Critical Text Advocate would use the UBS, the United Bible Society edition. So the apparatus in the UBS is not as thorough as the NA text. And typically it's going to show you variants in the UBS text, which are more akin to cause translation issues. So that's at least my understanding. I don't know if that's changed. That was a while ago now. But they would use the UBS when translating. It's just, everything's a little more handy there. But yeah, I don't like that idea. It's fair game if it's above or below the, I don't know. Then we start getting into like picking and choosing readings, and why are we picking and choosing certain readings, right? If somebody's going to do that, this would be my request. If somebody's going to use the textual apparatus reading instead of the main, whether it's in the Byzantine or whether it's in the critical text or whatever it is, then at the very least they should provide a rationale for doing so. Maybe in an appendix or whatever it is. I don't particularly like that the NIV did that. In fact, I didn't even know that they used a different text until they came out with the Reader's Edition. So yeah, and not only did they pick and choose, I'm sure they had good reasons, but good reasons. But the text itself is ugly. The font is terrible. It's a Reader's Edition, so it defines words in the bottom which occur so many times less. It's just ugly. It's just ugly to work with. I don't like it. So I didn't really even use it. I bought it and it just sits on the shelf. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so where are we here? I mean, if it appears, yes. Okay. It lacks Matthew 6:13. What lacks Matthew 6:13? I missed part of that conversation. We'll come back to that. Yeah, I just thought of that too. Ironically, the Catholic Mass does have Matthew 6:13b in it, separated from the Lord's Prayer. Oh, okay, yeah. This is the doxology in the Lord's Prayer. Matthew Everhard just did a video on that, and that kind of spurred the question that we talked about here today. I find it unfortunate that hell has evolved the sense of Gehenna when originally its sense was closer to Sheol. Yeah, that's one thing that the King James Version is interesting for. It kind of used the word hell for Gehenna and for Hades or Hades. And Sheol, I think there's some references to calling Sheol hell as well. It would be interesting to see the different words and why they're used there. Now, again, I haven't really studied the issue, but if there's a different word behind something, it's good to see that. Yeah, Calvinist Arminian debates are boring. Stick with textual criticism. Boring. I don't know if there's any Homestar Runner fans, but if you ever gone to the copyright page, if you sit there for long enough, Homestar Runner comes across, looks at the copyright stuff and goes boring, and then walks away. Yeah. There's your nod to the early 2000s, right? Okay. Most translations based on the Nestle Aland don't fully align with it. See the charts in the videos by R. Grant Jones. Yeah. R. Grant Jones is, he's got lots of good stuff. He's like the OG YouTuber, Bible translator, text stuff. He's good stuff. I recommend his channel. A translation of the Yambi says about its source, great attention has been taken to the latest manuscripts discovered to determine the best text possible. In general, the next of the Novum. Testamentum Graece of Nestle Aland was followed in the 27th edition. Yeah. Morano R. Grant Jones has an awesome channel. Yes, he does. I once got a shout out on his channel. I was so excited to see that. He was shouting out one of my interviews with Dr. Maureen Robinson. Friendly neighborhood Jesus. Wycliffe was the first one to use hell for both in English. Yeah, and that's probably why that tradition sort of stayed. Friendly neighborhood Jesus free. I've gotten in a lot of flame wars over in his posts. Oh, is that Grant Jones posts? Let's not switch to Trogdor criticisms. Consummate V's. Consummate. Burninating the peasants. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh, wow. The comments are just coming in. I'll probably just do a couple more comments here. I think we've been on for almost an hour and a half. We'll do a couple more comments and then we'll kick the live stream for tonight. So late to the party, so I'm responding to something 30 minutes ago. All right, you're going to have to wait 30 minutes to hear me comment on this. That may have been answered. In my experience, Calvary Chapel people, including pastors, generally know nothing about texts. Okay, good. I'm glad you answered that, because if you make it this far, I don't think anyone else in the comments answered that, unless I missed their comments. There's a couple other people who post a lot of polls and such, and I usually post very strongly Protestant interpretation. Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't posted any polls in a while. I should probably post one when I'm done here. Nice. Textual criticism or Greek or Hebrew. Oh, okay, that's a continuation of Dever's post. Bible Chapel people generally know nothing about texts or textual criticism or Greek or Hebrew, with a few luminescent exceptions, but they do generally love the NKJV. Yes, I've noticed a lot of Calvary Chapel people using the NKJV. It looks like I tilted my camera by accident. That's okay. You're just going to have to deal with this line here not being straight. So any of you OCD guys, you're just going to have to deal with it. I'll fix my camera after. All right, late to the, where are we here? Trogdor the Burninator. Yeah, Tyndale did the same thing. He just used hell for both Hades. Yeah, that probably went through because, as you know, the King James Version was, I wouldn't say revision, but pretty close to a revision of the Bishop's Bible. Maybe it kind of was a revision of the Bishop's Bible, and tend to keep the readings from the Bishop's Bible where there were no other matters of translation or textual matters. I believe it's for tradition's sake, though, simply because their founder, Chuck Smith, liked it, or the KJV. It could very well be, but I just heard it. I think I heard Mike Winger say that when he was doing his Mark 16 video. That's probably where I heard it. He was saying that a number of Calvary Chapel people tend to see like a sort of conspiratory view to... Not all of them, but some, a conspiratory view about the Egyptian text in Antioch and whatever. Maybe I got to be careful there because I don't know if that's entirely true. But yeah, I think I heard it from Mike Winger that they tend to prefer TR-based translations. I'm not familiar with Calvary Chapel, but I do have a Calvary Chapel Finger Lakes hoodie. Nice. Yeah, the whole thing with Lonnie Frisbee and Chuck Smith and the movie that just came out recently, I forget what it was called. That was basically chronicling the start of the Calvary Chapel. I'm concerned about preachers who say hell isn't a real place, regardless of what you want to call it. Yeah. I know there seems to be a move online, which tends to see universalism in a greater light. It makes me nervous. Yeah, Jesus had lots to say about hell. Okay, they got the unfortunate use of charity for agape from the bishops. Could be. Yeah, Jesus Revolution. That was the name of the movie. Good. Thanks, Mr. Moreno. Disagreement about doctrines being affected. 1. Scripture in general teaches fasting. We don't need that specific mention. Yeah. I would challenge that only in, it does speak generally about fasting, but it never applies it to, or at least the critical edition never applies it to casting out demons. Never applies it to casting out demons. I listen to Chuck Smith's sermons too. Oh, yeah, I do too. Yeah, actually, I enjoy some of Chuck Smith's stuff. Chuck Smith's stuff. I consider universalism another gospel. Yeah, it's that's too bad about Rob Bell. Jacob Emmanuel. I seen a dude on IG and Instagram making some interesting arguments for universalism. Yeah, I had a Twitter account. In fact, I think if you look on the bottom left of my little frame here, I have the Dwayne Green on Twitter. I had another Twitter account and I had to close it down because it's just junk. A lot of it's just junk. It's political stuff and people arguing back and forth, and just, I don't know, to me didn't seem like a very beneficial place to share my content. So Instagram, I kind of see that in the same light. I know Instagram is typically used for kind of some nefarious stuff, some, people putting their sultry images on there, and I just don't want to see it. So I don't have an Instagram account either. I found Facebook a great place to share stuff, and YouTube to share my videos. This would be a question. This would be a question for everybody here in the comments. This probably is going to depend on your age. I don't know how old you guys are, and I'm not going to expect you to type in your ages in the comments. But if you're of the crowd born in the 90s and the early 2000s, you would know what a Discord server is. And I had been considering starting a Discord server to talk about these textual matters. Let me know in the comments there if you think a Discord server would be beneficial and helpful. If you don't know what a Discord server is, you can go ahead and even leave in there and say, I don't even know what Discord is. Let me know. I use Discord for some things, but I prefer IRC. Okay. Yes, Mike Winger did say that. Yeah, okay. That's about Chuck's the Calvary Chapel. And anathema. Yes. Galatians 1, and anathema. Let him be accursed. Which is the curse of Achan is upon those who preach another gospel. I never knew that Chuck Smith went on to hang out at Cheers and make multiple attempts on Bart Simpson's life. What? I clearly missed something there. Twitter is a cesspit. Yes, absolutely. I only go on there because I think there's one or two people that post only on Twitter, and I'm interested in their stuff. I think James White only posts his stuff on Twitter now. I haven't seen anything come on YouTube from him in a while. Jacob, you're turning 31 next week. You did what I said you didn't have to do. We now know that you're 31, Jacob. And it's now publicly processed all over the internet. It's all, yeah. Okay, Discord. Yeah, 44. Oh, very good. I'm not there yet. I'll get on your Discord. Okay. I watched the Jesus Revolution during a 6-hour flight to Seattle. Kelsey Grammer. Oh, okay. There we go. Kelsey Grammer Place. That's right. Anathema is the Greek word used to translate an Old Testament term used to mean not only a curse, but a type of dedication to God that required complete annihilation. There we go. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. You were just telling me about how universalism is bad. And now you're going for annihilationism? I'm just kidding. As that explains this. Yeah, the Sideshow Bob reference. Gotcha. All right. Okay, well, guys, it's been about an hour and a half, I think, somewhere around there. I'm tired. It's 10:15. It's late here. So I think we're going to shut down the live stream for now. I'll probably cut out some parts and post some of this a little bit later because I think there was some helpful bits that someone else could use and not want to watch the whole live stream, and that's good. So I will do that a little bit later. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. We'll kick it up next week with something else. I'm not sure just yet, but I'm sure it'll be just as good and just as interesting. And with that being said, brothers and sisters, until next time, we'll see you around.